Hey, thanks for joining us for this week's post-message Vodcast as we wrap up GodTalk 2.0. We're super excited because we have a new face in the room that hasn't been a part of this in the last few weeks. And so we've got Pastor Sean Miller joining us, the famed pastor here at Lakeside. And then we've got right next to him, Josh Bolin.
Hello.
Or Josher. And then I'm Ryan, pastor of
his college name?
That
Josher?
was his college name, sort of.
From like two people.
Yeah, for me and I don't know who else.
That's your name for everybody now.
Yes. So, and then we've got John Bowles here with us. And so we are recapping and having a conversation about the message from this weekend, diving into some conversation about what was covered, also asking questions and unpacking anything that we thought was interesting or needed a little more depth to it. And so, Sean, why don't you give us a recap of what we talked about?
Yeah, a quick overview. We've been in a series called GodTalk 2.0, follow up to a series we did last year. How do we talk about God in our culture? How do we talk about God when we're thinking about how things are changing? How do we converse about spiritual things with people that might be in various parts of the journey? And so really what we did this week is we talked about the journey itself, the process itself. And the question we're asking is, what is this whole process? What is this whole journey saying to us? And really what we tried to do is sort of zero down in to kind of pausing and taking a breath, which in this culture is difficult to do for various reasons. But we wanted people to kind of pause and locate themselves. Where am I in this journey? What part of the journey am I in? And we tried to give some language to the journey. And so we divided it up, kind of going off a great study that I read about 12 years ago called The Critical Journey. It's a great book. If you want to get that book, it's in the Bible app, the YouVersion app that we use. It's by Janet Hagberg, and it's a great study. And it just puts language to the spiritual journey, something that oftentimes we lack. And so we talked about these 6 stages and how they're fluid, and sometimes we move in and out of them, and how life shouldn't be like a roller coaster where we're up on the high mountain and then we're down in the pit of despair and then back up on the high mountain. But it also shouldn't be like a merry-go-round. Rather, this process that we're on ought to be going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into maturity, and we ought to see some change, some growth, some transformation in our lives. And so really it falls in line with what we've been talking about lately at Lakeside, and that's, hey, let's go further in this. And so we tried to help people locate themselves and then just ask, what would it look like for you to go further?
So I'm curious, there's a word that you just use and that I think gets thrown around a lot, and it's that word of maturity, and especially in the process. And so how would you define maturity, spiritual maturity? Because I think a lot of people have these different working definitions, and you hear of some people saying like, oh, that so-and-so is not spiritually mature, or, that
me. Not as spiritually mature.
Exactly.
It's usually in that context.
Exactly.
Unspoken.
We don't know how to define that and I don't know that there is like a sweeping, like locked in definition, but in the sense of our process, how are we defining maturity so that we have an awareness that we're moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the things that if you dive deeper into a study like this, that you'll find is that there's a lot of information that I couldn't talk about on the weekend, specifically in the latter couple stages.
Right.
And if you get into those, so you're in the inward journey, you're coming out the other side. The inward journey can be described as a painful process. It's the ancient writers called it the dark night of the soul. It's a trial, it's a storm, lots of language to talk about that, but we come out the other side and we're different. And we're not as much in a rush as we've been before. We've stopped comparing ourselves to others. We In fact, we sort of don't even see ourselves as much anymore, and yet we see ourselves more clearly. So
Right.
there's a bit of a paradox there. We have paid attention to our heart, and we've done diligence in self-leadership so that we can love others more effectively. So Jesus said, love God with everything that you got and love your neighbor as yourself. And one of the things that I don't think we've done a good job in the church, at least in my experience, in my sort of little corner of the world, is that we haven't paid attention to our own heart very well. Almost because we've said, well, no, it's not about me, it's about God, or it's about the other person. And somebody will even go so far as to say, when they do something really amazing, they will say, oh, that wasn't me, that was God. And I always try to say, if it's appropriate, no, it was both of you. Because isn't this what the scriptures teach? That it's us working with God. And yes, all the glory goes to God, and we say those kinds of things, and that's fantastic, but sometimes we ignore our own heart. So maturity is somebody that can pay attention to their life, reap the benefits of it as a blessing for others.
Sure.
And because they come through the other side, when they go through that dark night of the soul again, that inward journey, they have more tools to be able to go through it the second time.
And the third, and the fourth,
Yeah.
and the fifth. Because that was one of the things that stood out to me, or one of the things that as I was reflecting, was that I feel like there's been so quick overview of the inward journey in the wall. It's like this was one of the stages of the critical journey, is that you get to this place where you have to kind of deconstruct what you once thought, or the way you once understood particular issues or God or his perspective on things. And I feel like there's been several walls over the course of my life, my young life, that I've hit at different times and had to break through those walls. I think about the first time I remember, you early on you think, oh, the Jesus followers, it's all butterflies and daisies, it's like the first time you experience pain as a Jesus follower, that's a wall that you're like, okay, now what do I do? Where do I go from here? If you can get through that, then there's like wall after wall after wall,
right,
that you have to be able. So that's really, I think, helpful to think about. Every time you go through the wall and make it to the other side, you have better tools to help you do that the next time and the next time. And then in the context of GodTalk, to be able to walk through that journey with others who may be asking some of the same questions, or even if they're different questions, be able to help impart tools to them on how to address those things and to reflect on those issues.
I sometimes call those walls like Monday, Tuesday.
You got a case of the Mondays.
Yeah. No. Something that Paul says. So you spent some time in Philippians chapter 3, and you talked about Paul running for the prize, or talking about this goal, this thing that we're. I think that NIV says straining for the prize, like forgetting what lies behind and straining for what lies ahead. But the thing that I love that Paul says in that too is that around verse 12 he says, not that I've already obtained this. And that I think that has been such an important little pause for me as a Jesus follower, that part of maturity, so we mark the steps, we know where we're at, we can celebrate the things that God is doing in us and how he's moved us down the line. And part of maturity is realizing that we're not there yet.
Absolutely.
That's been super helpful for me. So anytime we feel like we've arrived with anything, then it's danger, Will Robinson. It's time to back up a little bit.
Right.
Not that I've already obtained this.
Right. That's good.
Yeah, we used to have a professor that said, I forget exactly how he worded it, but he would define spiritual maturity as being more aware of and comfortable with the things that you don't know.
Yeah, spiritual maturity is being okay with not having all the answers.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's something that has kind of stayed with me from college, and that I think as we look at the stages, and I think some of this is personality driven, just the way that I'm wired. I wonder about, we're always looking to go further. We're always looking to grow. So in the stages, does that mean pursue walls? Does that mean pursue pain, or do you passively wait for those to come up in your life?
Yeah, I had a great mentor who in some ways is still mentoring me because he's such a part of my life. We just celebrated his 75th birthday party. And when I was in college, he was my college pastor. I went overseas with this guy. He was one of the college professors. He was a basketball coach. And he used to tell us, he used to get really intense because we were basketball players, and he would say, "Men," and because we were an all guys team, and he would say, one of the prayers that I've prayed consistently in my life is, "Lord, keep me at a point of need." And at that point, when I was in my 20s, he used to tell stories about how he's almost died 3 times. Now, I was there one of the times he almost died. It was way out in the boondocks in this place called Punta Balaarte in the Philippines, and he almost died right in front of me.
That was the name of my first band.
Punta Balaarte, yeah, exactly.
We didn't make it.
Yeah, straight from Grass Valley. And so he was given a little message at his birthday party, and now he's almost died 6 times apparently.
Oh my gosh!
He's had these things that have happened to him, and so early on, as a young follower of Jesus, I came to follow Jesus when I was 20. I grew up in sort of a dysfunctional family, dysfunctional church, like all of us sort of do to some extent. So I sort of was in a time of life where we're open to being really crazy and radical. So I started praying that prayer, keep me at a point of need. And then I started backing off of that prayer because I thought, I don't like this. Yeah. Quite frankly, life is too uncomfortable when you're constantly at a point of need. And there were a lot of, times and stories, from my 20s where I saw God working in that way. But nevertheless, there's something about the story of Peter falling on his knees on the seashore, and then the bookend with that, jumping out of the boat. No one else jumps out of the boat. Peter jumps out of the boat because he needs to be with Jesus so much. He needs to go further so much in what he's facing. And so I think what we get with somebody like Peter is we get somebody that was constantly kept at a point of need. So do we pursue it? Your question. I think we do, but we do it with a ton of humility. We're careful about it because that's one of the things where it seems like God will meet us right there and quicker than we think. And it's a bit of a mystery to me. So yeah, I think maturity demands that we pursue the dark sides and the difficulties and the challenges and say, hey, I need to break through this wall, or I'm just going to be perpetually stuck, and nobody wants to stay there.
And I think even if you're just paying attention, those walls happen all over the place.
Sure.
I don't know how you live in our culture right now and pay attention to what's happening all around us, the political climate, the global climate, what's going on in these different parts of the world, with mass shootings and suicide and like all these awful things that are happening. I don't know how you don't hit those walls. If you're not if you're paying attention, it's like, oh my gosh, like how do you have to be ignoring it.
But I think that statement, paying attention, I think that it's shocking how many people aren't paying attention. That the conversations of like, oh, everything's great, like life's good, because all that stuff's, I hear about it, but it's all over there. It's all, away from me, or, even the political climate. It's like, we can sit and hear about all the vitriol and all of this stuff, but really, as long as my little community is good and we're not impacted by anything, then we can just, we can ignore that. As long as my kids are healthy, we go to church every week. I think that we have a culture that is so distracted by cat memes or whatever that we're not paying attention, and that prevents us from hitting those walls. I think that's a challenge that we have to kind of as pastors kind of step into and be like, open your eyes, like this is what's going on. Obviously more tactfully.
Sometimes it's just uncomfortable though. Sometimes if you
Yeah.
don't have the tools to navigate,
Sure, yeah.
if you don't know how to engage with the conversation, then a viable option is to ignore it.
Sure, yeah.
Because, what are you going to do? I have no words to say. I don't know how to deal with this, And so I hunker down in I keep my pain buried in that spot that nobody knows about, It's, so I agree with what you're saying. At the same time, I have a passion to help people have the tools to be able to even know how to have the discussion.
Yeah.
Because you've got voices coming at you every 3 seconds.
Right.
Telling
So
you what
true.
you should think, how you should think. It's exhausting. I'm tired. Are you guys tired?
Yes.
Like these days, it's just.
Yeah, and I think when you're tired and you're like fed up or you're just out of energy, you talked about, I don't remember all of them, but you talked about the 4 options when you hit the wall, and one of those is just to go back to stage 3.
Yeah.
I think that's the easy, I'm tired, I'm just gonna fall back to this, where everything in my little world is good and I'm engaged and I'm excited, but you never break through that barrier of what was holding me up here.
Yeah, I think stage 3 is the easiest one to get addicted to, at least in our culture. It's super clear.
And that was the productive life.
Yeah. And the irony is that, again, all these things is interesting. There's an irony to them because it's such a beautiful stage. When you see somebody using their gifts and coming alive with how God has wired them, it's one of the most beautiful things that we get to experience as leaders. We get a front row seat to that. And the discoveries and the growth and the antithetical way of Jesus of giving your life away, and yet you're full. You're full. It's like you keep on giving away and you keep on getting filled. So it's beautiful. It's so addicting though. And what I mean is that it, in some ways, getting a job and staying busy is a form of insulating ourselves. It's a form of medicating ourselves. Right. It's an addiction. And to top it all off, our culture really lifts that up and praises that. Look at all the things you're doing. You volunteered 25 times this week.
Right. How do you do it all?
Unfortunately, sometimes that can be the most counterproductive thing that we can be doing. And yet it's the easiest. The church is designed for that. We're really good at that. And sometimes we just don't know how to say no.
Right.
And the church doesn't know how to say no. So when I say the church too, leaders in the church, we don't always know how to say no to people. No, you don't need to volunteer again.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
There's something else you need. Let's walk through that.
Right. Yeah, because at some point you lose the sacrificial element of that, like that, because the kind of the productive life in Christ is when you're sacrificing, you're giving of yourself and you're giving it away, and at some point it becomes so routine that it's just, this is just what I do. Sure. It's not hard anymore. Yeah. It's not,
and it becomes part of your identity. So,
right.
It is a drug. It is addictive to be busy in the church while people are patting you on the back, and then so it's not only a way to hide, but it's a way to get in touch with my ego, and feel good about myself, which is not bad. I think we should enjoy serving. I think that's, but still, our identity gets messed up in that.
And maybe to bring some clarification too, because whenever you divide something as fluid as the spiritual journey, so to speak, however we want to talk about this, it's easy to go, okay, you're in this stage or this stage or this stage or this stage. And so when I talk about the inward journey and actually being less productive, slowing down, I don't mean that we completely check out from serving.
Right.
In fact, your community that you serve with, there may be somebody in that community that is uniquely equipped to walk you through the inward journey.
Right.
So it's really slowing down enough to be honest with ourselves, to pay attention, and to create space in our lives where we can go through the difficult things that we're facing in that chapter of the story.
Well, I love the visual of, you talked about like the merry-go-round journey. You're continually visiting the same place over and over and over again, but the corkscrew is not, it's not a straight line,
Right.
you know, or up and to the right. It's this kind of, you kind of swirl through the different stages, but all the while going deeper and deeper and deeper.
Right.
To me, that's a great visual for, you know, it's not like you start here and then you jump out of the journey and you're over here for a little bit when you're on the inward journey, and then you jump back in.
Right.
You're kind of constantly in this progression, this movement. I thought that was a super helpful illustration for that.
Well, Sean, if there was one thing that you would leave people with that maybe you didn't feel like you had the time to get to, or maybe like a super like practical thing in pursuing probably more discovery, you know, of where they're at in the stages or in their pursuit of growth, what would that one thing be as we kind of wrap up?
I would say maybe a really good exercise for anybody to do, which if you're a young mom and listening to this is gonna be hard for you. You know, if you got a big project due at the end of this month, you know, and it's year's end and you're pushing to get back in the black in your business or whatever it is, it might be hard. But having said all that, to take an afternoon and to take your computer or your iPad or old school journal and write out where you feel like you're at in this whole journey and reflect on that. Start there. And then the second step is critical. You got to share it with somebody and say, hey, do you see this in me? Because when I look at me, this is what I'm seeing these days. Do you see this in me? Now, the third step would be to begin to walk towards whatever that next stage would be. And so you might want to pick up the book, The Critical Journey, and go deeper. Or you might want to get together in a small group and say, how are we going to go further together? How are we going to grow together? Yeah. So that third step is like, okay, now you have to actually walk forward in this. You know, if you're an athlete, you got to go to practice. You can't just work on your own, and you never get back onto that team if it's a team sport. If you're a runner and you work on your own, you got to go run in an event with a bunch of other runners at some point. So to re-engage community and start taking those baby steps forward, and that's really what our adult ministries is about these days, and trying to help people take that next step, but also again our small groups and that sort of thing. So we want to be here to help along the way.
I'm wondering if we can post on social media or something the 6 steps in the journey so that people are interested in finding that, because I don't know how long the YouVersion on the Bible app stays up.
Yeah.
Maybe we can just post that so that for our people who are watching and or listening who want to evaluate and reflect, we can send them somewhere.
We'll post the book, Critical Journey,
This one.
and the 6 stages.
Those little descriptions.
The little descriptions. And
post it on Facebook.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
That'd be cool. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us for the Post-Message Vodcast and podcast. I got it. That's amazing. We hope that this was a productive time for you and gave you some stuff to think about and maybe to dive into. And we hope that you have a great week. We'll see you this weekend for our next gatherings. Take care.
Bye.